In 1974, Umberto Lenzi tapped into the giallo genre, displaying his versatility as a director. Spasmo is a wild ride that mixes typical tropes of the genre with a fairly unexpected conclusion. I am the Italian Horror Guy, and this is the Italian Horror Guy podcast. So, this was a bit of an interesting rewatch for me because I found myself in the very unfamiliar position of actually being shocked by an ending. One of the downsides, I suppose, of being a giallo enthusiast is I feel, whilst I certainly haven't covered all of anything like all of them in my watching journey, I do feel like I've covered a lot of the best ones. And Spasmo has been a film of great interest to me for a while because I just love the music so much. This is a Morricone classic. It's absolutely just gorgeous. And sometimes, I don't even know if you'd call this a criticism, but sometimes uh, Morricone's giallo themes could possibly be accused of standing slightly independent of the content of the film and just feeling a little bit like just adding class to it. Um, Certainly as a something worth crediting, but without it necessarily matching the tone or mood of the film. This score absolutely does not have that problem at all. I think um, it just captures that glorious uncertainty and confusion of the giallo. And uh, you know, I must say I can't quite believe that I'd forgotten how this film concludes. Not that it's like an incredible twist, but it does have that thing that films do to us occasionally, where it's like there seems like a fairly obvious conclusion, and you think, "No, that's too obvious," and then the film leads you in a different direction, and then it turns out to be sort of that, but it sort of has a double conclusion in a sense, which is interesting. But especially within this particular genre, I think it's especially surprising because Jali have a habit of they'll give you every possibility under the sun for like who the killer is or whatever, or all these different things. But generally, they'll dwell on one early in the film, midway through the film, and then it'll quickly be dismissed as a possibility. So I don't think it's necessarily lost on us early that the main dude whose name escapes me right at the moment um, is possibly off his rocker. But I think we've all watched films before where like the characters or the main character are sort of being made to. There's that sort of gaslighting process, right, where they're made to feel a little bit insane. Christian, of course, the very aptly named Christian. Um, but in a sense, we end up getting gaslit because it's like, oh, this guy is a bit of a jerk, and it's there's a certain brilliance to it, right? It almost like plays on our knowledge of the genre against us, shall I say? There are those scenes. There's that scene early where he's met Susie Kendall, and her name being Barbara, the beautiful Susie Kendall, who it is sad didn't hang around in the genre for longer. She was in a few of these films in its heyday. Uh, and it's this bizarre process where it sort of feels, I think it's like the first day that he's met her, he starts like referring to her as his little whore or something. And she's very playful about it. And it's like, what the even for a giallo, this is like, what the fuck is going on? It's really on the nose, but it sort of goes, oh, like it's sort of, because of what the genre is, we're probably sort of going, well, this is problematic depictions of men and women and sexuality and whatnot. So yeah, I can sort of buy this, but no, it's actually the film sort of giving us the conclusion, uh, very subtly, and I really do think mystery films. It's a great thing that doesn't happen often enough, in my opinion, where a film actually gives us the ending, but we wouldn't notice it. Like one of my favorite versions of that, I'm sure I've probably mentioned it before on the podcast. I definitely would have in the episode where I talked about it. In Deep Red, where they just show the killer just standing there. Like we just see her face, but we don't notice. Anyone who has noticed that, mad props to them. Like on their first viewing, So, you know, the ironic thing about the conclusion, if one ever bothers to actually think about it in this way, is that it is being self-critical of that kind of attitude, because, as I said, it is comparatively on the nose, the way Christian is treating Barbara, as in comparatively to other Jali, and it sort of lives up to that in the end. It's like, oh, he's got these bizarre urges, and look, I'd have to watch it again with a specific eye to this, but I sort of feel as though by the end of the film, most of the contradictions and whatnot actually are actually sort of covered for, because it is a film that can be annoying to follow, shall we say, and don't get me wrong, I will criticize some of its structural things as we go on, but for a film that you can't tell if it's like slightly surrealist or not, I I feel I feel very I felt very comfortable and satisfied at the end of the film that, like, no, actually, this was quite coherent, because it's one of those films you want to be good. I think most of the actors are really cool. I really like Umberto Lenzi, and I think this film, when combined with Man from the Deep River and controversially Cannibal Ferox, this bloke wasn't just some hack director. I think most of the giallo and Italian horror directors of the era did tap into whatever was popular at the time, but some things are popular because they're cool. So if you do a good job of it, you do a good job of it. So let's get into the chronology of the film. And you know, I really, I really love the way I love the use of mannequins in Jolly. It wasn't done often enough. They're just so creepy. These very lifelike mannequins. It's really effective. Um, yeah, it's really effective. So, according to, again, I'll go with the Wikipedia plot, which is very thorough. So it says, a young couple on their nightly hormonal romp decide to go to the beach. So this is some classic Wikipedia, where they first meet a mysterious man who is parked there. After asking for a couple of rowing, yep. So they discover a hanging woman, which turns out to be a brutalized mannequin. The mysterious man peels off in his car before they ask him for questions. Sorry, before they ask him questions. Now, it is mysterious. I believe the conclusion would indicate that in the end that this is his brother Fritz. Uh, you know, as I was saying earlier, it's like sometimes these giallo films, and frankly, it's probably the difference between the not necessarily the good and the bad, but the well put together and the not so well put together are the ones where you just have all of the elements of a giallo film, like a bit of nudity, that sexuality, the wonderful music, often by Morricone, uh, really good looking actors. You tick all these boxes, but they're not necessarily that coherent. For so much of this film, it feels like that's what it is. It's like, okay, what's this dude at the start? What are these mannequins? But like by the end, you're like, actually, that was. It's interesting for a movie to confuse you and then unconfuse you, especially in this genre. So I think what's sort of difficult to follow at the start of this film is the way it jumps through events. It's not necessarily clear what the timeline is, but it's also not clear, like why are people disappearing, and like why is this person now not in the film? So uh, now we have Christian and his, according to Wikipedia, first girlfriend. Uh, they go to the beach. They see a woman's body. Um, they seem to be doing some kind of sightseeing, and then the girlfriend, like, I believe she sees it, Susie Kendall, lying in the sand, face down, and you know, she sort of gaslights him a little bit, but it's like sometimes it feels like the film's chasing tail. I know I'm getting caught up on this, but I'm really trying to work my way through it. It is a bizarre introduction. She's lying face down, she gets up, she's alive, and then she sort of acts a bit strange. And there's a lot of this, like, it turns out, I think we find it probably about an hour in that, like, there was this plot. And it's, look, I don't want to say that it's, too, I don't necessarily want to claim it's not too easy, right? Like, for a film to be doing these slightly confusing things, like why is Susie Kendall acting this way? Um, why are all these characters acting so strange? And then it's almost like an evil twin device where it's like, oh no, there was a plot. However, it sort of works because given the given what it ends up making us think, uh, Fritz is quite well. He's Ivan Rasimov was an evil looking bloke, to be honest. He had that sort of those vampiric facial features, and he never feels like anything except at least nearly a villain in this film. So it's actually quite. I think it's like the double bluff, and double bluffs can be annoying in films, but I think this one's not annoying because it does a great job at making us like Christian throughout the film and making us be like, but he maybe he's not all there. But it's like, oh no, it was just a plot by his evil brother. But then it's like, no, well, yes, it is a plot, but he also is crazy. So you almost get away with the way that all the characters are acting to deliberately um, confuse him, albeit I can't. I'm not too sure about the motivations of why they did it. So we they go to Christian goes, I believe, with his girlfriend to a boat, and Barbara's there. Um, and we don't see after this scene. We don't actually see the girlfriend again, and it feels like lazy writing. But again, it's like no, that's all going to be part of the reveal later, which they do well enough. Now, I must say I absolutely love the chemistry between these two. Just looking at the actors' names, obviously Susie Kendall and Robert Hoffman. They're both very good-looking people, very, um, very charismatic. To be honest, all of Susie Kendall's relationships in these giallo films always work quite well. Uh, it's a very it's very quick and it works very well. And as a viewer, you're sort of straight away going, yeah, I'm sort of glad that we got rid of got rid of girlfriend number one. Like she was a bit boring. We don't really care so much about her. Um, so they drive through a wooded area, forest like, I suppose, to Barbara and Christian. And there are some mannequins hanging wearing lingerie. Creepy shit. Almost a bit of a Suspiria setting about it. That early scene, I think, where I can't think of her name now. Maybe she's called Susie. But she's in a taxi on the way to the dance school, and you see the first murder victim running through the forest. Very creepy. This isn't quite as creepy, but it's still pretty creepy. So they end up back at Barbara's motel, and Christian's going on about his awful childhood incident with his father, and that's it's probably too easy a device, but again, like a good giallo can get away with an easy device because we want. It's sort of like a really good theme, right? Like the most memorable themes, they have a pretty simplistic um, a pretty simplistic sound that we can all memorize. So, well, I think more complicated things are going on in this film, so we can deal with a bit of uh, uh, I had some childhood trauma and a little bit of analysis. Um, and there's also this complication with Barbara and her uh, not boyfriend Alex. I'm not necessarily sure if the film does explain exactly what the point of Alex is, other than the fact that they needed someone to kill Christian in the end, and that's the way that it turned out. I don't think the film ever wants us to give a shit about Alex. They just want him as some kind of um, confusing thing guy. So anyway, Barbara tells Christian that he has to shave his beard before they have sex, which he's a little bit, he's a little bit, a bit apprehensive about. But if Susie Kendall, you're probably going to say yes. Um, he eventually complies. He goes to shave, and then someone wanders in. This very strange, dare I say it, slightly Argento-looking man. Looks a bit like Argento and that little creepy dwarf guy from Burial Ground, uh, the Knights of Terror. If you can remember what both of those guys look like. Anyway, um, a strange looking man, the kind of guy that you would put in a giallo film as someone who's going to appear in a couple of scenes and be creepy and weird and mysterious. So they have this bizarre encounter in which Christian ends up uh, supposedly killing him. It says here that his name is Tatum. So he threatens Christian. There's a bit of a struggle. Um, Look, I think it's got to be said again. I don't know if this was sort of the intention. There's a there's a certain cleverness to the way this film, this scene unfolds, because the way it unfolds, you could probably be convinced that, at least in the context of a giallo film, that had this guy's intentions been clear rather than part of this plot to drive uh, Christian a bit crazy or whatever they're trying to do, that it would have unfolded this way. But then as it goes on, you're like, yeah, I guess it makes sense that he did set that up. I think the film, the thing that doesn't quite work about this scene is how he comes out and um, is all, oh, I just killed a guy. Now, when you first watch it, you think the whole scene is stupid, because like Barbara sort of immediately starts like comforting him, which is very, very strange. Like, can you actually like think about the logistics of that in real life? Like, she supposedly has no idea that this has happened, and he's just been in some struggle of which she hasn't heard any of, I suppose this was a completely soundproof hotel. And he's come out and just said what's happened, and she's like, I mean, she's like a comforting partner, but it's like, hey, it literally just happened, and the dead guy's just over there. So it seems utterly stupid until you realize later, of course, that it's a plot. So she knew it was going to happen, and you could even say it's a bit stupid that Christian doesn't react to her strange reaction, but of course he's a little bit cray cray, so that probably works as well. So it's sort of one of those films where you look back and say, you know what, not all, but most of those criticisms I had, I was actually probably wrong. That's what's so satisfying about it. Whereas, the weaker giallo films, they'll give you a lot to be interested in, and then they'll give you a bit of a shock ending, and you'll be like, wow, that was a shock. And then you actually sort of start reflecting and go, well, that was a shock because it wasn't well put together, and because it actually, given what they had showed us, could not have been that, but they've done it anyway. Whereas this is sort of the opposite. They give us a few things that are making us question, I'm not sure about this. And then it's like, oh, actually, that all sort of made sense. So that's what we're all about. Um, yeah, okay. Actually, it is interesting that it says here on Wikipedia that Barbara is strangely at ease with the concept of a dead man in her room, um, and that which is sort of what I just said, she convinces Christian that the best thing to do is run. So they go to a friend's place, a seaside castle and lighthouse. Now this is just one of those things that Jallo, that look, just about all of them were good at this. Just finding these settings, like these really, these kinds of settings where confusing, ambiguous things might just happen, right? Like why not go to the sea? Why not go to a lighthouse and talk to some creepy people? Like it's that kind of place where you can see. It's a place for reflection, but confusion, uncertainty, right? Like it's very very good, very and it's just a very lovely looking setting. You know, one thing that Jolly can never be accused of are not looking good. They're just, they are beautiful to look at. So we then get, like, Christian just alludes to his brother Fritz, and how he can possibly help. Now, it's an interesting thing, this. So I guess I'll start talking about the structural issues I take with the film now. It's not that it's a total disaster. And had the film had a slightly different conclusion, I think actually seeing Fritz an hour in is probably or possibly a strength. Because it's like we're trying to do with ideas and concepts, and Fritz, in a way, is an idea and a concept throughout the film. So making him material is probably not a good idea. So they don't do it for a while. The problem, though, is how central Fritz has become by the end. Again, and this is probably deliberate. This is probably how they wanted it, so we can end a bit confused. The problem is that last scene, it makes you, in the 70s, go home thinking, I didn't realize that this movie was about Fritz. And it's not about Fritz. So it just sort of, yeah, that aspect of it doesn't necessarily work. But up to this point, it is working, right? We've heard about his slightly troubling childhood, and we now hear about Fritz. But of course, Barbara says no one can help. And suddenly we see Malcolm and Clorinda, who are, a strange pair. Is it ever made clear who the hell they are? I guess, like, in a film like this, we sort of assume that they're a couple, but something's not adding up there for anyone who's seen this film. Uh, and this scene, other than the fact that I believe Christian, I know he does at some point, but I think he possibly does in this scene because he's looking at Clorinda a certain way that he sort of knows her. But you become very cognizant of the fact that Christian is like really not trying to hide any of this to anyone. And like, again, what sort of feels like a bit of a flaw of the film ends up becoming a strength, that he shows so much trust in Susie. Sorry, not Susie Kendall. In Barbara, you know, I'm not a strong woman, Christian. Uh, but he trusts her anyway. And then he starts trusting these people. I'm like, what? When I was watching it the other day, it really occurred to me in this scene that, like, it sort of feels like the film is wanting us to go, oh, well, these are the new unfamiliar people. But then you're like, well, he doesn't fucking know who Barbara is either. He's just in this like lighthouse or castle or whatever the hell he's in with three people he doesn't really know, trying to convince them that he's a murderer. And they're saying, nah, you're not. So it's a strange thing, but he's got this vaguely familiar thing going on with Clorinda, which ends up manifesting in something a little bit more down the track. So he gets told by Malcolm that he's creating a nightmare for himself. Fair enough. I think I'll go over to my notes now. There's too much going on with. I might flick between actually. He tells him that he's seeing everyone around him as an enemy. This is good. It's probably at that point that we're meant to sort of, our eyebrows are meant to raise a little bit, because this is it's very like psychoanalytical. It's very much leaning on the idea that these people might be actually thinking about this in a preconceived way. So it's building the tension, and within all this, I don't think we're coming across characters we dislike. I just think that we're made to like Christian a lot, and that even though everything that Barbara's done is a little bit strange, we just can't help but be drawn to her for obvious reasons. So, Malcolm tells him about a memory he had of a tragedy he remembers of two boys losing their father in a horrible accident. We get a bit generic here, and so this is where the writing is just a bit meh. Like, there's a bit of showing, not telling. Or, sorry, telling, not showing about it. Like, maybe if the actual story is a little bit a bit less generic, then it wouldn't be as annoying. But it probably is a little bit annoying, if I'm honest. And also, I don't think we particularly like Malcolm. I don't think we really want to deal with him as a driver of the story. But also, I think as well, like, after we find out that this is a plot, we probably begin to sense now that. Sorry, we probably in hindsight sense that. Yeah, I guess it was quite obvious that Malcolm had an actual proper connection to it. I'm just trying to work through in my mind. Again, I think the film probably makes it explicit. If it was in hindsight quite obvious that Fritz was like trying to drive Christian out of his mind to kill him, and if so, what the hell he told all these people who are ostensibly not against Christian but are in on the plot, just I guess for money. Um, yeah, I'm not sure that element of the plot works so well. All right. Right, let's go back to the Wikipedia one. My notes are all over the place here. My apologies. Hmm. Then- So eventually Malcolm's dead. I can't remember if we find out whether that was Christian's doing. I really can't. Um, but anyway, do we do we find it a little bit this middle section of the film a little bit much? The whole so we see Tatum appears again eventually, and it's all very well and good, right? Um, yeah, I think the light tower setting works up to a point, and then personally, I get a little bit sick of Malcolm. I guess we're glad uh, to see the end of him. I think my issue is that Tatum gets a little bit too much love from the film. He's in a few too many scenes, I think. So uh, Christian goes back to it says here on Wikipedia, his original girlfriend's apartment. Spends the night there and is accosted by Tatum, who is very much alive. Now, I believe the film has already shown us that he's alive, but I guess it's a shock to Christian. But is it that much of a shock? Um, so I'm just look. I apologize for my pausing. There's something that I'm really trying to work through in my mind here about whether I like or dislike it. This whole quarry uh, aspect of the film. I'm not sure I necessarily like the setting, although I do like the car explosion, which seems to be quite a genuine special effect. So well done to the team on that. But we know that there has to be scandal, and as I was saying earlier, there has to be a lot of different things in a giallo film, right? There's scandal, there's nudity, there's sex, there's charisma, there's fashion, there's wonderful settings, there's beautiful music. Um, if we're lucky, there's even that J and what is it, J and B, that whiskey that appears sometimes. All these little things. There's also got to be quite a bit of death, and I'm just trying to work through in my mind this section in the quarry with Tatum, who eventually dies. If it's an effective thing or not. So I say straight off the bat, I don't necessarily like the scene that much because again, I think we have enough of Tatum. So what does happen? A forcing drives to the quarry, revealing along the way that the plan was not supposed to involve killing him, just driving him crazy. But since he is being stubborn about it, he has to die. Right. Attempting to make it look like an accident, Tatum has him drive to the edge of the cliff and exits the car, quickly turning the tables on Tatum. Okay. So my problem with this is again, it's telling, not showing, and what's he being stubborn about exactly, Christian? Like, I just think it's a bit silly. So in my very naive conception of how this sort of secretive, almost hitman-esque type world exists, I'm thinking people like Tatum, despite their questionable choice of vocation sort of know what the hell they're doing. So, wouldn't it stand to reason that Christian is going to be stubborn, and that like you've done all this shit to him, you're confusing him, you're driving him out of his mind, you're making him think that he's killed you. You are now very much alive, talking to him, um, and it's sort of it's like he can't quite believe Christian stubbornness. Like, why won't you just let us drive you out of your mind, for goodness sake? And also, why is he telling him about all this? So anyway, I think that's the part of the scene that I'm critical of. What I'm not critical of, though, is like, again, there's often excuses, and don't get me wrong, this whole plot device is probably an excuse. But with these giallo films, we often, as I say, we get a lot of death. That's cool. What we often get is unrealistic death or unrealistic situations or seemingly unrealistic people doing things that don't that seem quite out of character for them. Now, it sort of seems out of character for Christian initially, because whilst they've been trying to drive him out of his mind, he isn't out of his mind from what we can tell. This is the brilliance of the film. It's the crux of the brilliance of the film, right? The way the film keeps us on side with Christian, and yeah, I think I must say I think I've worked through this now. That in the timing of the way things happen is very important. So in a traditional film structure, having a section about two-thirds of the way through the film where we find out about Fritz and his plan doesn't necessarily seem to make a lot of sense. But it's a very brilliant and effective way of us properly staying on Christian's side, because what happens when we are in the midst of a mystery and we're trying to work it out, if we're then like if we're then rewarded, say, with a bit of correctness. Like, for example, we're thinking, no, I don't think Christian is crazy. I definitely like him. I think he's a good person, even though he said that thing about uh, Barbara being his little whore the first day he's met her. Or even with all that, we're still going, yeah, he seems like a nice guy, and all these other people seem like assholes. When he then turns on Tatum and kills him with quite a degree of skill, first, he does deserve it, like regardless of whether Christian is a bit of a, well, not a bit, but a full blown lunatic psychopath by the end of the film. Well, he has been the whole time. Tatum still does deserve his treatment. Um, so, what the film sort of hides in plain sight, though, and this is the brilliance of the scene, is this isn't just Christian reacting to a very stressful situation in a tactically plausible way, but he's also acting in a way that is his nature. He does know how to kill people, and the film's done a very sneaky job so far of making it seem like he doesn't know how to kill people. So it's like, oh well, he's been pushed to the edge, and then obviously as things evolve, we're eventually like, oh no, he was already well and truly over the edge. So there's a certain genius to that. Um, Christian switches clothes with Tatum after he's thoroughly run over him. I think it's a pity we don't probably see enough of it, but I think he runs over his head. Like, he definitely runs over him, and then it appears he's about to run over his head. It's a very jello thing. Obviously, we see that in Deep Red as well. Nothing like a good head running over just to make sure that your victim won't be getting back up. Um, oh yes, and of course he smacked him with the open door, so it's quite cool. Um, and he decides to swap places so people think that he is the one that's died. Swaps clothes, um, and this necklace and all this kind of stuff. Uh, so he's, now the manipulatee has become the manipulator. But of course, we're totally on board with this. Tatum deserves to die. That's fine. We really like Christian, and the film has got us confused, and it's earned the right. This is the part that it really deserves props for. A film can tell us whatever the hell it wants, and it can do so in a cheap way. But you know, uh, Robert Hoffman's very likable. He seems trustworthy. He's made to seem more trustworthy by the fact that it feels like people are manipulating him. Even more so when someone tries to kill him, and he's all, "Look, I really don't know what I've done." Essentially, or like, what's going on? Why am I in this plot? Um, and when it turns out that it's right, like he hasn't, they have been doing this to him. We're on his side, so it's a very good diversion tactic from the film, and it isn't a cheap one. Like, regardless of budget or genre or just general quality of a film, shocks or twists or whatever are really not guaranteed to be effective. And in my opinion, when a shock or a twist, for it to be effective, one, it has to be a shock. Or at least enough of a surprise for it to be satisfying. But two, it has to have been clear in hindsight that all of the information was there. All the information required for it to be possible for you to have pieced it together was actually there. Um, and that's what this film does so bloody well, so much better than, and even little clues, right? Like the quote with, um, what he says about Barbara earlier. What the fact that he can kill this guy, the fact that he is very confused as well, like, because he's still trying to piece it all together. But frankly, from our perspective, it's actually quite obvious that, like, well, at least it's obvious he hasn't done anything wrong, at least based on what we've seen. Like, all these things are just sort of happening to him. Now, maybe he shouldn't necessarily be hanging around with Barbara because Alex supposedly has some kind of relationship with her. But, as she says, they're not together, and maybe he's just jealous. Um, so, let's get back to the plot. So, Barbara and Luca. Who the fuck is Luca? Anyway, Barbara and Luca are. Actually, I'm gonna check. Who's this actor? Anyway, Barbara and Luca make sure that Christian is dead. As they leave, hang on, where are we? Okay. Yeah, so they must see the evidence, the clothes or whatever, and anyway, so Christian follows them back to his family's factory. Maybe Lucas? No. Currently being run by his brother Fritz. It is revealed that Tatum was right. The plan was to drive Christian mad so that he has no claim on the family. Okay. Well, I do apologize. I blatantly missed that. I didn't know it was anything to do with family fortune. Again, a very a very generic plot device, but fair enough. Okay, well, at least that's good because, like, That is, well, just thinking about it now, that is another way for us, I think, to sympathize with Christian. Because it's like, what the hell was Barbara doing? She seems so nice. Like, why is she in on this? Just because Fritz gave her money? Come on, Barbara. Not good enough. She was so nice um, in Torso and The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. She would never have done that in those movies. Not good enough. So Barbara admits to everything. Wait, no, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong part here. Uh, Barbara reveals that she has full. Ah, yes, that's of course it's the 10 things I hate about you reversal. Getting paid to like someone and then actually beginning to like them. So Barbara reveals that she has fallen for Christian and is sick of both Luca and Fritz. Um, Again, I really can't remember who the fuck Luca is, because Christian was not supposed to die. But the two men are satisfied and tell her to just go along with it. Christian wanders the roads, disguising himself as a male prostitute and getting picked up by a female. Is that what he does? Well, I know he goes to an area where there are prostitutes, but he doesn't, like female ones, but he doesn't sort of act in that way. Anyway, there's something brilliant about the scene. Uh, Again, I suppose Luke is involved with it, but I really can't remember who he is. So I think he pisses off by that point anyway. Where it's just Barbara and Fritz, and I'm not I'm not totally sure what it is that triggers Barbara, but there's something that Fritz does. It might just be a combination of everything, right? Where up to a point, Barbara's like willing to say, "This is bullshit. How dare you?" Blah blah blah, and then something snaps in her mind, right? And it's like she's noticed something. Um, and she ends up backing to the door. Can't remember exactly what she says, but she backs away to the door. I think it's something about she'll stay out of it or whatever, and then she leaves. And there's something again. There's a brilliance to it. Like there is an absolute brilliance to it because it is a revelation that there's something off about Fritz, and we it's look the whole this whole element of the film is very clever because it's like, yeah, Fritz is a jerk. Ivan Rasimov again, like he always looks like he should at least be a jerk to some extent in any film that he's in or was in. But the level of jerkery we get is like he seems to hate his brother and wants him out of the fortune and isn't that disappointed that he's dead. But I almost feel like there's a little bit more in Barbara's realization. So it's good on that level because it gives us a preview of the end of the film, right? But perhaps more importantly, it is the final distraction that we need to get just that bit further on Christian's side. So there's this sense that, like, throughout the film, it's like, oh, Christian, like, there's still no question that maybe Christian was a bit crazy, and whilst they were trying to drive him out of his mind, he is still not all there. The realization, presumably from Barbara, not that she states it directly, is that maybe it's Fritz that's the crazy one. And we're definitely meant to make that association, I think. So, when we then see Christian, being a male prostitute, according to Wikipedia, and he gets in that car with that woman who, immediately wants to go to a hotel room. So I guess that is evidence that maybe he's a prostitute or whatever. He then gets very uncomfortable, and again, it's just there's when you combine it all, the collective diversions in this film are sort of genius because whilst we assume like Christian is, we assume he's super offended. Like, why is this woman coming onto him in this way? And we actually feel a bit for him. He's been through all this crap. You know, his brothers tried to drive him mad, slash sort of tried to kill him. He has nearly died. He's had to kill this man that he otherwise wouldn't have wanted to kill. And now, and he's had all these issues with women. Now this woman, after all this, just wants to bang. And he doesn't want a part of it. And then he's like, I want to get out now, and then we don't see the end of this scene. We don't realize there's a significance to why we don't see the end of the scene, which is because he's actually killed her, which, given it's near the end of the film, this gets revealed very soon anyway. But geez, it's just really good. It's really, really good because we get thrown off. Like, we think that it's like, no, he doesn't want to be treated this way, but instead it's like there's some like psychosis that's triggered in his mind by the offer. So yeah, again, certain genius to that. So Luca and Barbara are planning for their getaway. Okay, I think I realize what's happened here. I think it's initially. I think Wikipedia's confused Alex and Luca. Um, So when I said Alex earlier, just pretend I said Luca. Okay, that's making some sense now. Okay, so after leaving the factory, Luca and Barbara are planning their getaway. Christian interrupts them and reveals that he knows about the plot. Well, I actually think he interrupts Barbara because I think Luca is off in a bathroom or packing a suitcase or something. Barbara admits to everything. The two reconcile and make plans to escape, and the pair lovingly make up. This is actually one of the great all-time giallo reveals. It really is. Because, like, just think about all that's gone into it. We've met Barbara at the start. She's acting in a strange way. We're attracted to her. Christian's attracted to her. They sort of get together. She seems to be sort of gaslighting him, but she also seems to like him. He's had all these strange experiences with women, with Clorinda, with what the hell happened to his girlfriend at the start. He's just had to deal with the woman wanting to have sex with him. They thought he was dead. He is aware that Barbara was in on it, but he seems to love her. She said that she loves him too, and it's like, wow. Oh, goodness. And we know that there's long enough left in the movie, so this isn't going to be the reveal, right? Again, maybe that's pushing because my experience with Charlie is obviously like, knowing the length of the movie. And I'm sure in 70s grindhouses, it wasn't necessarily that obvious how long there was to go in movies. But anyway, this is speaking from my part. And then it's like, wow, to the point that when it happened, I was actually shocked. Even though I've seen this movie before, so evidently I hadn't taken enough notice or it hadn't embedded in my memory. But he starts seeing these visions, and it's such a great revelation. He sees Clorinda in his head. He sees the woman who's just come onto him in his head. He sees his girlfriend from the start. We see him killing all of them, and then we see him kill Barbara. And of course, Barbara has this sort of, or Susie Kendall has this almost immortal sense. Like, for example, she's actually still alive at last check at the age of 86. But she's some fucking how survived torso. She survived some very tenuous situations in Bird with the Crystal Plumage. So we're used to her surviving. And he just kills her. He strangles her to death, and it's really upsetting. And it's like, wait, what? What? It's very uncommon in a giallo film, even when they have genuinely good twists, for you to see it happen and be impressed, but then not go, yeah, well, I'm still impressed, but okay, fair enough. this is so much more satisfying than that. You know, like even in Don't Torture a Duckling, for example, which is, as you hopefully know, in my opinion, the greatest film ever made. I know it's a massive call, but even then, as great as the ending is, it's not like it's any kind of shock that Don Alberto's the killer, right? This film has done everything within, as in, uh, Spasmo has done everything within its power and very effectively to be like, wow, the world really is against Christian. And then it just gives us the finger and says, no, no, Christian is a piece of shit after all that. And he just kills Susie Kendall of all people. How dare he? How dare he? So she's strangled to death, and it's really sad. And again, almost to the point that I was like, did this really happen, or is it just in Christian's head or something? But no, it really happens. And obviously, he has killed Clorinda as well, and the other women that I mentioned. And then he runs outside. We cut to Fritz, having investigated the car crash, worked out that it isn't Christian who is dead. And he goes to his mansion, and then he watches some family movies. Now, okay, it says here, as he is watching them, it is revealed that Christian had had mental problems as a child, and that his father's lunacy is hereditary. Now, when I was watching this, I actually think there's quite a massive opportunity missed in this scene. A very obvious massive opportunity. Now, first I'll say the footage is remarkably good. So this film is made in the 1970s, and they're watching footage from presumably something like 30 years ago, or about that. So from the 1940s, and frankly, it seems more HD than the actual fucking movie. But anyway, we'll look past that. The young actors, the young blonde actors who were playing young Fritz and Christian, seem to be cast the wrong way. The one who, at least I'm pretty sure this is correct, the one who is playing Christian has a very similar jaw structure to that of Ivan Rassimov, Fritz. And I thought that the film was revealing this to us because, as much as I'd forgotten the Christian ending, I had remembered the. I think I'd probably forgotten it because I'd remembered the Fritz ending. And I was watching this the other day, thinking, it's like it's the reveal. It's like the Bart Simpson evil twin Treehouse of Horror reveal that, like, no, they was swapped at birth. That's what I thought the film was doing, because the child playing Christian, not that he necessarily looked like either of them, but he had a very distinct square or rectangular jaw, very similar to Ivan Rassimov. So I thought that's what the film was doing, but it sort of isn't. I mean, it's cool footage, by the way, because we see Malcolm there, and he was a doctor or some shit, and we see Clorinda or whatever, but it just felt like a good way to add on top of the twist. But really, like, part of the purpose of this scene is to reveal that the madness is hereditary, which I'm pretty sure is bunk science. But the giallo did. Oh, fuck bunk science. What the fuck ever. The giallo did this a little bit at the time. Like, I'm thinking Cat of Nine Tails with that gender gene or whatever. I don't think it was necessarily claiming to be scientifically accurate. It was just a thing. They were just playing on theories and making horror movies. So we'll forgive them for that. We'll even applaud them for it. Great. Yeah, so, all right. So Fritz has flashbacks. It reveals Clorinda was the nurse at the hospital. I'm not even sure the ages really work out. Because she seems sort of younger than them. And she doesn't seem younger in the flashbacks. But they're children, so whatever. Um, right. So he. Okay, it's shown. This is where it shows that he kills Clorinda and dumped her in the well. I must say, I thought that might have been his girlfriend. Um, okay, yeah, sorry, I confused this actually. He does see the faces when he's uh, having sex with and then murdering Barbara, but I think this is when it actually shows the deaths um, and how he did them. So my apologies for that. Um, Now it's calling Luca Alex again. Um, so yeah, just to conclude that thought on the flashbacks, it's still telling us. I think it might say in the flashback that the disease is hereditary. Um, Anyway, it just could have been better. So we see he's he wanders out of. Now we're back with Christian. He wanders out of the house or apartment or hotel or whatever the fuck it is. He's in the woods or something, and he comes out to see Luca slash Alex, but I think Luca, and he tells Luca to shoot him, which Luca obliges, and then um, Christian wanders or stumbles, and then eventually dies at the beach. The next morning, you know, face down where he found Barbara, and there's a certain poetry to that. Well, there's a great poetry to that because it's like he's come full circle. But I'm just trying to see if I can. I'm trying to work out if it's brilliant or just slightly poetic. um, because I guess Barbara is sort of his circular story. She's not dead like he thought she was. In the end, he kills her. Now he's dead. Yeah. I'll let you guys work that out. And he dies. And the way he pleads with Luca or tells Luca to shoot him, and then that he stumbles and that the film doesn't even imply it. Basically tells us that this madness or whatever is uncontainable or uncontrollable. It just can't help it. He almost seems like a sympathetic character, and that I'm not going to say it's problematic, but it is a bit like, come on, film, you got us to like him against all odds, as a means of essentially throwing us off the scent. But then when you reveal to us, you're like, oh, okay, fair enough. But then you want to tell us to like him anyway? I'm not sure. Anyway, then we go to the brilliant last scene. Fritz wanders home. I love the subtlety of this. Not the subtlety, the initial subtlety of this scene where he just sort of wanders over to this room and like he has to unlock it. And you're like, oh, what's going on here? Because I mean, you know, Jelly usually they give us the key end information and that's it. So they've already given it that as that we know Christian was crazy and evil and murder and he's died. So presumably there's no more information. But the film's going, well, just check this scene out. So he wanders into a closet. And there's all these mannequins in lingerie, and again back to the mannequins thing. So again, I assume it was Fritz who we saw earlier in the film with the mannequins, and he's there's holes in them because he stabbed them before. Um, he just sort of slowly moves around. It's so cool. He's looking at them. It's like he's sort of in love with them. It's got real that Wild Rose song with Nick Cave and Kylie Minogue. All beauty must die vibes to it. He doesn't necessarily seem to hate these mannequins, but he does know that they need to die. Um, so we hear the voiceover again telling us that that the insanity is hereditary, and then he stabs the mannequin, releasing his pent up rage and craziness. Uh, I don't know if it states this explicitly, or I don't even know if it's trying to state it implicitly, but it sort of gives the impression that like he's he's going to start murdering and he's trying to contain it. Not that he has already, because I've seen the mannequins earlier in the film and stabbings in them and whatever. Um, and it almost feels like the passing of the baton, right? Like Christian's died, but this is a problem. Oh, for Fritz as well. I'll point out that yes, simple devices regarding insanity and whatever, and the fact that it's hereditary is, I totally accept them. What I maybe don't accept as much is like this insanity is like very specific, like this need to murder beautiful women, right? Which is a very giallo thing. I just wonder if it's like they maybe just needed one or two extra lines of dialogue to just maybe make it that little bit more convincing, because let's be honest, it's a little bit silly, right? There's this inherited insanity that he got from his, well, that both of them got from their dad, that causes them to need to kill women, beautiful women specifically. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm well aware that there are many psychopaths who this ends up their actual method. So I understand that, but I don't know. It's just a little bit simple, but that's okay. They wanted that as a plot device, and I think it's a very good one. As I mentioned earlier, I think on the one hand, introducing Fritz sort of an hour in is very, as in we hear about him, but actually seeing him just an hour in is probably a really good thing for the way that we are meant to sympathise with Alex. Sorry, with Christian, uh, and you know, it takes away our sort of clouding of judgment, right? And it probably, just as another thought on that, it adds to that sense of secrecy and uncertainty that we have to wait. It feels much more like a plot, right? Like we get immersed in the secrecy by the fact that Fritz has sort of kept a secret. Um, but on the other hand, if you're going to make the end of the film so much about Fritz, like, put it this way: the intense look on the face of Ivan Rasimov in that last scene, the way he's looking around, the way he's all uh, seems a bit distressed by his need to stab these mannequins, all that. That scene, it's hard to fathom that scene is the last scene of a movie where this guy wasn't a central character, is probably what I'm trying to say. Nonetheless, that sort of concludes my thoughts on the film. As I said, as I have touched on, it's confusing, but it also ends up logical in a giallo logic sort of way, more logical in the end than probably a lot of these films. And wonderful cast, as probably came through in the way I was talking about it, and incredible music. So it was very good to revisit, and to, well, to realize what the film actually is, and to remember the way it concludes, which is quite wonderful. So it's ended up sort of technically being the third Sunday of the month, which I think I'll do. I will do third Sunday of the month each month this year for the Italian Horror Guide podcasts. I haven't totally settled on my film for next month. There's a very good chance it will be an early 80s film. I'm thinking possibly an Argento one, like an Inferno or a Tenebrae, but at the moment I'm thinking it's likely going to be Fulci's New York Ripper. which I think is a fucking sensational film, quite a controversial opinion. So yeah, fuck it. I think I'll do that. I'll do New York Ripper next month. So do join me for that. Um, and yeah, until then, I am the Italian Horror Guy, and this has been the Italian Horror Guy podcast.